every single top-tier VC has set up shop in Israel. Consumer tech startup doing significant things. That's unbelievable. Everything else has evolved. Welcome back to the newest episode of Tech to Tanks. I want to talk about something a little different today, and that is that many people speak about the Israeli economy, the GDP, the tech ecosystem, and we've had a pretty eventful year. I think we can all agree. I would say that Israel's fighting an existential war, and so you would think when we're fighting an existential war and there's volatility in the region, that the tech ecosystem would, I don't know about crash, but you would see a decrease in all the numbers. Of course, that's not the case. A little background. In the Bible, in actually 2 weeks ago, the Torah portion that we read, there's a very interesting verse, and that is that it says in the Torah, and to be clear, not in the commentary, literally in the Bible, the Old Testament, it says that as the Israelites were being persecuted in Egypt, I'll remind you the Israelites were slaves in Egypt for 210 years. As they were being persecuted, the Torah says, the more the Egyptians tortured and persecuted the Israelites, the more the Israelites reproduced and flourished. Think about that. You would think the more a nation is persecuted, they would be decreasing in number, not increasing, and not flourishing. But that is the story of the Jewish people, and today is no different. Despite the existential war, you look at the tech ecosystem, and not only is the tech ecosystem surviving, but it's flourishing. You can look at any metric you want. Look at M&A deals, mergers and acquisitions, Israel broke records. Look at funding, Israel broke records. It's pretty unbelievable to see. But let me give you a little background on this thing called the tech ecosystem. Surely you've heard of the book Startup Nation. Startup Nation is a book that comes to answer a very simple question. How is it that a country smaller than New Jersey, in one might say the worst neighborhood on earth, despite all the challenges, leads the world of innovation across all sectors? And it gives many explanations. It gives the military, it gives the government, it gives the culture. It's an amazing book, highly recommended. But what is going on in Israel in terms of tech? Here's a little background. There are many ways to analyze a tech ecosystem and its strength. Let me give you a few examples. First thing, in order for tech to grow, in order for startups to work and scale, you need capital, you need money, you need investments. So let's look at investments. In 2020, a couple of years ago, there were $11 billion invested in Israeli startups. $11 billion in a country smaller than New Jersey, and again, the most unstable region on planet Earth. $11 billion, that's pretty impressive. Remember, this is a country smaller than New Jersey. Can you imagine New Jersey startups raising $11 billion in a year? It's a wild number. That was 2020. 2021, and sit down for this, we didn't raise $12 billion, we didn't raise $13 billion, we didn't raise $26 billion. So 2020, $11 billion, 2021, $26 billion, which is an absurd leap. I mean, an unbelievable leap. So you have capital flowing into Israel. Again, everything I'm going to say, remember in the context of a country smaller than New Jersey in the worst neighborhood on earth. So we have money flowing into Israel. But in the tech world, there's something called, quote unquote, dumb money and smart money, or strategic money. So where is this money coming from? These billions and billions of dollars flowing into Israel, where are they coming from? Is it quote unquote dumb money? Is it some random guy who has some extra capital in his pocket just throwing it into Israel? Or is it something a lot more strategic? And the answer is the money flowing into Israel is coming from everywhere. What do I mean by that? I mean, you have a hard time finding a single top tier venture capital firm, a single one that has not set up shop in Israel. They're all here. Lightspeed, Sequoia, Benchmark. Some of them are a little more passive. Some of them a little more active. You have every single top tier VC. By the way, angels, which are, I would say, private, high net worth individuals, are also throwing money at Israel, but let's put those aside. Every single Battery and Bessemer, I mean, the list is basically endless. Every single top tier VC has set up shop in Israel. And I'll tell you something. Keep it between us, though. There is one venture capital firm that has one office, and they do not have an office in Israel. And one might say this is the top VC in the world, and that is Andreessen Horowitz. Mark Andreessen famously invented Netscape, which one could make the argument is the first modern day web browser. Before Netscape, before the web browser, we could not access the internet. You had to be basically a developer to access the internet. Mark Andreessen invented Netscape. Today we use Chrome and Safari, but Netscape was really the first modern web browser, and Mark Andreessen invented it. Andreessen Horowitz and his partner, Mark's partner, Ben Horowitz, I think is a pretty big consensus that they are the top VC in the world. I mean, first investors in companies like Facebook and Twitter and Slack and many others. They have one office. Now, I had the incredible opportunity to interview Mark Andreessen, and I asked him a question. I said, Mark, all of your colleagues are in Israel. They're all here. Why are you not here? And this is public information. You can go read this. I think it was published on VentureBeat. He said, we have a one office rule. Andreessen Horowitz is only in Silicon Valley. But when we break that rule, quote unquote, when we start our second office, it's going to be in Tel Aviv. Which, again, why Tel Aviv? Why not London, LA, New York? Unbelievable. Andreessen Horowitz, who does not have an office here, told me that when they open their second office, it's going to be in Israel. By the way, furthermore, they do have a venture partner that is looking to invest in Israeli deals. It's kind of under the radar, but they do have people sourcing deals in Israel. I've personally sent Mark Andreessen several deals, and they've invested in several Israeli companies. So even the amazing Andreessen Horowitz that does not have an office in Israel is both sourcing Israeli deals and thinking about opening a second office in Tel Aviv. So the money flowing into Israel isn't just in terms of quantity, but it's quality. Every single top-tier VC has set up shop in Israel. So that's in terms of capital. What else can you look at to measure the success of a tech ecosystem? Well, you could look at success stories, right? You could look at, companies that have scaled and have succeeded. So within that category, there are two subcategories, right? There's private companies and public companies. Private companies are startups that are started by a person, an individual. There's equity, there's investors, things like that, but it's not publicly traded. I mean, you can't buy stock. And in the private space, when it comes to tech, there is a term called a unicorn. That means it's a private company that has surpassed the $1 billion valuation. It was called a unicorn back in the day because it was very rare. Today it's a little bit less rare, but if you want to look at unicorns, how many Israeli unicorns are there? Remember, in the private space, this is an unbelievable statistic, there are 1/10 of the world's unicorns. The entire world, 1/10 of them in Israel. Israel has more unicorns than the entire European Union, which is just, it's hard to even fathom. It's hard to even digest. The numbers are completely crazy and disproportionate, by the way. So that's private. What about public companies? In the stock market, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, you have the country with the most companies on these stock exchanges is, of course, the United States of America, 350 million people. Number 2, China, 1.5 billion people. Number 3, yeah, you guessed it, Israel, 10 million people. That makes no sense, right? You have companies like Wix and many, many others. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap of Israeli startups on the public markets. So both in the private and in the public markets, Israel, once again, dominates. But what types of companies are being built in Israel? The answer is, once upon a time, traditionally, Israel was very, very strong at cyber and semiconductors. For obvious reasons, the military. Today, you'd have a hard time finding a single sector of technology in which Israel is not a significant player. Now, I want to emphasize, when I say a significant player, that doesn't mean we're number 1 in the world. We might be number 2, we might be number 3, but in many sectors, we are number 2 right after Silicon Valley. Traditionally, Israel is very, very, I would say, soft or weak in the consumer tech space, right? Consumer apps. Why? Obvious reasons. Israel's a tiny country. How do you build a consumer app with the potential market of 10 million people? So Israel was always very weak at consumer. No longer the case. You have so many unbelievable Israeli startups, many of which, by the way, you are familiar with. Some of them you know are Israeli. Some of them you don't know are Israeli. Everyone knows Waze, obviously. Wix, which is a website building platform that basically owns half the internet. After WordPress, Wix is the biggest website developing platform. And just open parentheses and say that many of the people who boycott Israel are using websites on Wix, not knowing that it's Israeli. But other companies, Fiverr and Lightricks and so many other companies, consumer tech startups being built in Israel. So even in consumer, Israel is dominating, which is unbelievable. And then you look at multinationals, right? The big tech corporations, things like Amazon and Apple and Facebook and Microsoft and Oracle and NVIDIA and many others. Again, you'll have a hard time finding a single leading tech corporation that has not set up shop in Israel. Now, are they just here to say they're here? Are they just here kind of passively, not really doing anything? The answer is no. They're building core elements of their portfolio here in Israel. So I'll give you a few examples. You're probably watching this on your iPhone or on your Android phone. If you're watching this on your iPhone, the chip, the processor of your phone is developed here in Herzliya. But it's not just the hardware that's built here. The software is built here as well. What do I mean? When you unlock your iPhone, the company that developed that technology that we call Face ID is a company called PrimeSense, Israeli startup that Apple acquired. That's in terms of Apple. You look at Microsoft. When you use Microsoft Teams and there's AI built into Microsoft Teams, that's developed here in Herzliya. You look at Facebook. Facebook, obviously, or I should say Meta, is a company with scale that the world has never seen. 2.5 billion daily users. It's crazy numbers. But the company said, we have so many users in the Western world where they have, fast internet and things like that. What about emerging markets? What about Africa? What about these places in Africa that have super slow internet? Now, when you and I download an image on Facebook, it takes a split second. Why? Because we have fast internet. But when you have slow internet, maybe you'll remember back in the day of dial-up, it takes time. And so, when you click or you open a picture on these platforms and it starts loading super slowly, that leads people to leave the platform. And Facebook says that's unacceptable. We want, the millions and millions of people in emerging markets to use our platforms as well. So they built Facebook Lite, which is a stripped down version of Facebook. That's built in Herzliya and Tel Aviv, by the way. Facebook has several offices here. You look at Oracle, built here. You look at every single, Amazon, the drones, department of Amazon that we all know is going to be a lot more active in the coming years, started by an Israeli named Menashe, who's a good friend. I mean, literally, you will not find a single leading tech corporation that has not set up shop here and is not doing significant things here in Israel. That's unbelievable. So you have that. Then you look at, let's call it impact tech, right? Companies that are making the world a better place, not nonprofits. I want to be very clear. Companies that are doing well by doing good, right? Simple companies are doing amazing things in this world, whether it's cancer research, whether it's mental health and other things like that. Once again, Israel leads the way. You look at cancer research, I've been told by some of the leading cancer experts in the world that basically every single leading cancer treatment and cure developed in Israel. You look at mental health, there are amazing companies building, platforms here to take what we know from mental health, whether it's therapy or, treatments or other things from the, non-digital space to the digital world. Just for example, there's a company called Kai. Kai is basically an AI, product, a bot that enables you, a person who maybe is in therapy, to complement my therapist with an AI bot. It doesn't replace therapists, but you can have daily reminders to help your mental health and other things. So that's in terms of mental health. The answer is every single way you want to look at this ecosystem, Israel is absolutely dominating, and it shows no signs of slowing down. That's the amazing thing. So when our enemies talk about boycotting Israel, and we've all seen these memes, but I want to just emphasize how ridiculous of a statement that is. I'm going to boycott Israel. Really? Okay. So when you wake up in the morning, you can't unlock your iPhone. You can't take a picture on your iPhone because dual lens technology was developed in Israel. You want to water your garden? No go. Drip irrigation was developed in the Technion, right? You want to go to work? Good luck with that. You can't use Waze. In fact, you can't use Google Maps either because Google owns Waze. So you can't use Google at all, right? You get to work. You want to, speak to your friend over the internet, FaceTime or Skype back in the day, or Google products using the internet to communicate. Well, that was developed again in Israel. So really, you want to speak to your friend about certain revolutionary treatments like the pill cam, where you can basically take a camera and swallow it and looks and examines, your insides, your internals, and to evaluate if you have some sort of problem. It's developed in Israel. The list is very, very long, but you basically cannot use any tech product in 2025 without using Israeli technology. So those that are saying they're going to boycott Israel, yeah, good luck with that. It's not possible. By the way, I didn't even scratch the surface. But the reality is that the Israeli tech ecosystem is not only surviving this existential war in this very difficult year in Israel's history, but it is continuing to flourish, continuing to thrive, and again, shows no signs of slowing down. So that was a little bit of an overview of the tech ecosystem in Israel. And I got to tell you, on a personal level, for the past 15 years, I found myself positioned right in the middle of it, meeting some of the most incredible people. I just want to point out that whatever, sector you want to look at, let's take one example, right? Let's take transportation. We know by now that in a couple of years, our cars are not going to have steering wheels. We all know that. There's no question about that. Well, how are cars driving themselves? Autonomous vehicles, how does it work? The answer is there are basically three options. And I'm not going to get too technical here, but basically there are three options. Option number one, your cameras, right? Obvious. Car has cameras around it. It can tell you stop, go, it sees signs, etc. Great. Cameras are incredible, high resolution, amazing. Slight problem. At night vision, not so great. Fog, forget about it. So cameras are good, but not good enough, because when we're talking life and death, we're talking about a car driving potentially at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. There's no room for error here. So cameras are just not good enough. Cameras could be okay with another technology to complement it, but cameras, independent of anything else, not good enough. Then there's radar, right? I remember as a kid, my father had a radar thing in his car to find cops and warn him of cops. Radar is great, but the range is just not good enough, right? Yes, radar will tell you if there's something 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet ahead of you, But what happens if there's a serious, obstacle on the road, I don't know, a few hundred feet ahead of you? Radar's not good enough. And then there's something called LiDAR. LiDAR are the ridiculous things that you see on top of autonomous cars now, those big systems. That enables you to sit in an autonomous car. But clearly our cars are not going to have those massive, ugly things on the roofs. So I would say the holy grail is to take LiDAR and shrink it down to a place or a size that it could sit on a car without anyone knowing. Well, of course, the leading company in LiDAR is a company called Innoviz, Israeli startup that has signed a strategic partnership with BMW. The new BMW 7 Series already uses Innoviz LiDAR on their cars. So the new BMW 7 Series is basically autonomous. And I got to tell you, Mobileye is another company that leads the way. They do use camera technology, very advanced cameras, not just regular cameras. And the founder of Mobileye is a man named Professor Amnon Joshua, who is basically Israel's Elon Musk. And I say that because he has several unicorns, right? He has Mobileye, he has Orcam, which is an unbelievable company that enables people who are visually impaired or blind to see. Now, it doesn't obviously let them see, but it puts a camera on their glasses, and I could hold up a newspaper in front of my face and it will read the newspaper to me. And if someone's approaching me using face recognition, it can tell me who is approaching me. Wild technology. But I had the unbelievable opportunity to go to Amnon Joshua's house and experience the next generation of autonomous cars. So we get in this car. It's his house is in Mevaseret, it's a city outside of Jerusalem. We get in this car and we drive to Mobileye headquarters in Jerusalem in rush hour. And if you've been in Israel, you know how amazing Israeli drivers are. Despite being in rush hour, despite being on the road with Israeli drivers, we sat in this car, drove for about, I would say, half an hour. And when I say autonomous, I don't mean semi-autonomous. I don't mean it changes lanes. I mean fully autonomous. I mean, we sat there, we didn't touch a thing. Not the steering wheel, not the gas, not the brakes, nothing for a half an hour. I can say that I don't think I've ever felt more that I'm living in the future than that morning. It was unbelievable to see. And that is the future of our transportation. So when it comes to transportation, Israel's leading the way. But I got to say something. I said this before, but it's an important point to emphasize. And that is that we like to call ourselves a light unto the nations. Now, what does that mean when it comes to technology? Does that mean Google is in Israel? That's great, right? Billions of dollars being invested in Israel? Great. But does that make us a light unto the nations? No. The answer is there is something that makes us a light unto the nations, and that is impact tech. Again, companies make the world a better place. And I got to tell you literally just one example. There's a woman named Sivanya Ari, a good friend, amazing woman. She's from France originally. She lives in Israel now. And she looked at Africa and she said, how could it be that we have solar panels on every single roof in Tel Aviv? And you get on a plane, you go to these remote villages in Africa, they don't even have running water. And now you and I might know this. Most people know that. But how many people do anything about it? I don't do anything about it. Do you? So Sivan says, no, that's unacceptable. And so she built this company called Innovation Africa. And they basically build the infrastructure in these villages for running water. And if you Google it, which I highly recommend you do, go to YouTube, but prepare some tissues on the side because you actually might start crying, because she goes to these remote villages and you watch this video and you see these African kids who have never seen running water before, ever. And they're playing with the water in the video, thinking they're brothers and sisters from Israel. That is a light unto the nations. So that's really unbelievable and inspirational. But I want to give you one more metric by which to measure the success of an ecosystem. What drives all this stuff? What drives tech and innovation? The answer is creativity, thinking out of the box. So how creative are Israeli startups? The answer is very, very creative. And I'm going to give you one example, and I kid you not, there are hundreds of examples like this, but I'm going to give you one. If you think about your office, right, your home office, your work office, you think about the devices that you use. We've all started to use these devices that are basically supercomputers in our pockets. I mean, we have these phones, these iPhones. The processing power of this thing is quite literally more than a computer just a decade ago. So all of our devices have evolved, everything except one. There's one device that I guarantee you that you use and that you hate because you're not sure if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. And if it works, it's a clunky experience. You hate your printer. We all hate our printer, right? Even when it works, it's like zoom, zoom, zoom. Like, why hasn't it evolved? Why have printers not evolved? Think about it. Everything else has evolved. Why not printers? And the answer is very obvious. A printer needs to be the size of a piece of paper. It can't be smaller. You need to put the paper into the printer. So there's not much wiggle room here, right? Other devices have shrunk, but a printer can't get any smaller than a piece of paper, right? Wrong. That is the way normal people think. Comes along an Israeli entrepreneur named Tuvia, originally American, and says, wait a second. Why do you even need to put the paper into the printer? And you'll say, well, how else are you going to print on a piece of paper? This guy built, and sit down for this, a mobile robotic printer You ready for this? You put it on the piece of paper and it walks on the paper and prints. I'll repeat that. You put a printer on the paper and it walks on the paper and prints. It's called Zuta Labs, and you can watch it online. It's magical. There's no other way to describe it. Their videos are incredibly viral. I think that hardware, specifically printers, is not an easy space for investors. So they are raising money, they've been raising money. It's not an easy space at all. It's a challenge. But when you think of creativity, you think of out-of-the-box thinking, Israeli startups don't think out of the box. Israeli startups don't have a box. They shatter the box. And so to watch that, to see how creative these entrepreneurs are, and I meet them basically on a daily basis, it's actually mind-blowing. So I just want to summarize and say that for the last few decades, Israel has excelled at innovation across all sectors, shows no signs of slowing down. And even in this war, despite the challenges, the volatility, you have to understand half this country's in reserve duty. Like literally, companies are working at half capacity. And despite that, Israel is continuing to over-deliver. And any investor will tell you that. So I would say it's borderline miraculous to see. It's exciting. And on a personal level, like I said, I feel very privileged to be a part of this ecosystem, a small part, but it is pretty biblical. I think that we're seeing the verse that I mentioned in the beginning of the more the Egyptians persecuted the Jews, the more the Jews flourished. And I think that today, I think we could say it a little differently. The more they terrorize us, the more we innovate. The more they destroy, the more we build. And this is backed up with actual data. This isn't like an abstract thing. You could look at the data. The more terror there is in Israel, the more innovation there is. It's unbelievable to see. It's inspirational. I would say biblical. It's miraculous. And again, we show no signs of slowing down. So that's a little bit of an overview of the tech ecosystem. Which sectors are going to be hot? I think everyone knows AI, right? Generative AI, and I'm going to give a very short overview. AI has been around for a long time. In fact, AI is a little bit of a ridiculous term because there's basically no app or even no computer that doesn't have AI built into it. So AI has been around for a long time. So why all the hype now? Because there's a new category of AI called generative AI. What is generative AI? As it sounds, it generates information. So when I Google something, Google crawls the web and finds that information to present it to me. Generative AI doesn't crawl anything. Generative AI generates the information. So you can ask ChatGPT or any of the new generative AI Grok, right? It's Elon Musk's new generative AI product. He released a standalone app recently. You can ask it any question. You could ask it a question that the answer exists nowhere, right? And it will answer you and it will create that, that information. In fact, you could ask it to generate a picture of anything and it will generate that picture. So generative AI is, of course, super duper hot. There's a lot of fear around generative AI because it's kind of able theoretically to replace human beings. Of course, I'm just going to calm down on that because it's not replacing human beings. In fact, if you look at any technology that's ever come out, from the tractor, when the tractor came out, farmers freaked out, right? When print came out, publishers freaked out. When the internet came out, libraries freaked out. The answer is every time a new technology comes out, human beings freak out. We're not very happy with change. AI is no different. It will be fine. AI is not going to replace human beings. I'll tell you what will happen though. Human beings who use AI will be replacing human beings who don't use AI. Meaning meaning AI is a tool and it's a very effective tool. It can be used for many things. And so there are kind of two schools of thought. It's one is like, let's embrace it to the end, right? And there's like the teachers who are like, don't use ChatGPT in school. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. We should be embracing it, not again to replace humans and human creativity, human critical thinking, but to push it aside and say we're not going to embrace AI is ridiculous. There's no avoiding it. And so there's no question that generative AI is going to be it's not going to be, it is the new hot space. And of course, Israel has, I would say, hundreds of companies in the generative AI space. And we're well aware of that space. If I'm being totally honest, I don't think we're strong enough in generative AI. I don't think Israel has embraced it enough, but in our defense, it only became popular during our war. So I don't have any doubts that Israel is going to lead the way when it comes to generative AI. But for now, we have some unbelievable companies using generative AI, building language models. ChatGPT, again, became very popular. It's its own language model. It's LLM, large language model. There are Israeli startups that are building their own language models, like a company called Personal AI that builds an AI language model for a person. So I think you can go to hillsfuld.personal.ai and you can speak to a chatbot that has crawled all my content, all my tweets, all my Facebook posts, and knows basically what I know. And not only that, but it's able to imitate my voice, my actual voice. You can ask it a question, it will answer you, and there's a little audio button, and it will talk to you and give you the answer in my voice. Hello, it's great to connect with you here. How can I assist you today? Are you interested in discussing the Israeli tech ecosystem, startup advice, or perhaps something related to Jewish values and Israel advocacy? Let me know. It's a little spooky, not going to lie, but Israel's dominating. Israel will continue to dominate. Israel will grow in generative AI. It's very exciting. Is Israel going to struggle because of this war, or are we going to continue to thrive? I mean, the answer is the numbers don't lie, and Israel is continuing to grow and continuing to face the challenges. And their challenges, let's not diminish those challenges or belittle them. The war is pretty, this era is a pretty dark era for the state of Israel, or maybe the darkest, but Israel shows no signs of slowing down, and I don't think Israel's going to slow down. So I don't actually think that it will affect us negatively. I actually think it will affect us positively because, again, the Jewish people are constantly in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you got to fight extra hard. And that's what's happening. So I'm very optimistic, very bullish on the Israeli tech ecosystem. And, I got to tell you, on a personal level, I'm all in on Israel right now. I'm not really doing tech, but I'm meeting such incredible companies. I met a company called diagnostics, and what they do is saliva-based diagnostics. I mean, think about pregnancy tests, right? Peeing on a stick. What are we really peeing on a stick? So they built this AI-powered technology, of course, that is able to bring you the same results as a pregnancy test. Instead of peeing on a stick, you basically give it some saliva and it diagnoses you. And that's just one example. They have strep tests, and there's other massive breakthroughs that they're working on right now. Can't share much more, but it's just one example. So again, you're going to see some of the most incredible companies come out of Israel in the coming years, and we won't be slowing down. We can't afford to slow down. This war will only make us hit the gas and move faster and harder.